Hello, welcome to Upgrade. My name is Jonathan Wrenn, and I am so excited to be here today as a part of Upgrade. I am a member of Abide in Truth Ministries, and I thank Upgrade for allowing me to talk to you today about gentrification. We are going to cover 5 main topics: economics, education, family, religion, and trauma. What do we mean by gentrification? The term gentrification is usually traced back to its first use in London in the 1950s and 1960s to describe the influx of a new gentry into low-income neighborhoods. More recently, a report included this definition: the process by which higher-income households displace low-income residents of a neighborhood, changing the essential character of that neighborhood. This process includes 3 dimensions. 1. The displacement of lower-income residents. 2. The physical transformation of the neighborhood, mostly through the upgrading of its housing stock and commercial spaces. And 3, the changing cultural character of the neighborhood. In the U.S., gentrification has most often, but not always, been in areas characterized by poor physical conditions, concentrated poverty, and the racial segregation of people of color. It happens in communities of color where poor conditions and disinvestment were the result of a history of political policies and private real estate practices that undermine property values and living conditions in these neighborhoods. More recently, the term gentrification has been used more broadly to include any neighborhood that is becoming less affordable to current residents, regardless of the history of the neighborhood or the outcomes for residents. This more recent usage obscures the process underlying neighborhood change and also trivializes the different outcomes for members of non-white racial and ethnic groups and for neighborhoods with histories of systematic disinvestment. Gentrification is a word that gets tossed around a lot, especially in Philadelphia, a city where some neighborhoods are experiencing rapid demographic shifts. The change means different things to different people, but a common set of factors can help ground conversations. There is no consensus on what gentrification is or even whether it is good or bad, but any reasonable person should be able to recognize that displacement is a matter of concern. This displacement has 2 dimensions: the stability of neighborhoods, residential community, and the harder to define culture and character of the neighborhood. There is indirect displacement, which refers to changes in who is moving into the neighborhood as low-income residents move out. While there is often a lot of movement in and out of rental housing in low-income neighborhoods, vacated by low-income residents are no longer affordable to other low-income households. This is also called exclusionary displacement, since future low-income residents are excluded from inhabiting the community. The gentrification of University City, or petrification, forces Philadelphia's already vulnerable black population out of their homes and brings white families and students into their former neighborhoods. While the emotional toll brought upon those displaced is immeasurable, researchers have calculated that alongside a general decrease in the black population in Philadelphia, the black population in West Philly specifically has decreased by 29% between 2000 and 2012, a staggering demographic shift. As the neighborhood becomes more white, property values continue to increase exponentially, pushing black residents further west and banishing them further from Penn's campus. This is just one example of gentrification in Philadelphia. There are many more examples of gentrification, but Penn is just one of them. We want to talk about economics and how do we gain our finances and control the real estate in our communities. And I want to talk about that after we just mentioned what we mentioned about gentrification, because it comes down to first getting educated. We need to start real early with our children and making sure they're getting what they need in school as early as kindergarten. We sometimes take it to be okay that children have trouble learning, but we need to realize that that trouble learning can often lead to them being gentrified later on in life. And that education plays one of the most important roles in economics in the black community. Now, of course, besides education, you have to look at trades and work for younger people that might not want to go to college. They need to start to learn how to work and save money. So you need to have those training and jobs available at a very early age. You also have to look at the banking system and say, well, we need to teach them how to save and get loans and move their money around, and also make investments so that they have the ability to be able to keep their housing during the gentrified process, and that they won't be afraid of someone taking their house because they're economically stable in their community. Now, family also is very important, and the traditional family structure, which is no longer the norm, is definitely one that helps to keep gentrification from happening, because traditional families had more incomes in the household, which allowed them to be able to move their finances around and be able to combat the gentrified process, be able to have their taxes up to date and not be able to be moved out of their homes. We underestimate the importance of family in the gentrification process, but it's very important that we look at the traditional family and start to recognize that even though traditional families are not around anymore, whatever family has become the tradition now needs to look at that family structure and ensure that that family structure has what it needs economically, and education needs to be a big part of that in order that they can keep their housing as well. Looking at religion as another situation that could help control gentrification, what role does the church play in our community in stopping gentrification? Well, the church has a lot of influence on different levels when it comes to gentrification. The church also first needs to be educated and be aware of what is happening in their community, first and foremost. But once they are aware, then they have to look at how their sermons and their teachings and their development of Christians in church becomes very important for that person to have that support, that knowledge. And also churches have people who work in different areas who can become a resource to help you through the gentrification process or help you combat the gentrification process. So churches, because they bring the community together, are definitely like one of the first lines of defense to get people of different cultural backgrounds, different financial backgrounds, different educational backgrounds, and like I said, some people who may have expertise in the field to be able to come together as a team and help black families stay in their housing, in their neighborhoods, and slow the gentrification process. Now, also looking at trauma, what effect does gentrification have on the next generation, and how much trauma does it actually cause to the community? It's very important that we understand that gentrification has a traumatic effect, where looking at it from the way that others who are gentrifying look at it, they think, well, they'll be okay. Well, they will be okay in the long run, I'm sure, because we have to move on. But you can't take away what you just did to them. You just traumatized the family, had a family have to get up and move and be displaced, and maybe moving to an area that doesn't have the same resources, that doesn't have the same SEPTA locations and the things that allowed them to save money, move, or be able to move around in the city of Philadelphia. So the trauma, I think, is one of those things that we don't look at with gentrification that we really should look at, and that maybe when these people gentrify the neighborhood, they should actually be responsible for some mental health counseling and maybe some other types of medical help that would allow them to slow the process because they would start to be more sensitive to what they are doing to the black community and to black people. We cannot just say they're going to be okay. We need to understand that young people need a stable home to be successful. It's very important that they have stable neighborhoods. It's very important that their environment is an environment they're familiar with. It makes them feel safer. If they're moving around a lot or being kicked out or displaced and they see their parents are being displaced, it makes them feel as though that people don't care about them and that there's nobody there to help them, and that when they grow up, the same thing is going to happen. So there is a traumatic effect from the adult losing their home all the way to the child losing their home, and we need to always keep that in mind. Now, we definitely can talk about the cause and effect and the different things that go with gentrification in our communities, but the solutions are probably the most important thing when you talk about gentrification. And of course, we listed some solutions here, but gentrification, being that it is different for every neighborhood and the cultures are different in every neighborhood, it cannot really just be put into one little package. The solutions can't just be one, this thing or that thing. The community needs to get together and meet immediately when they realize that this process is going on. And that's part of how you get to the solution, is by putting the community together, having them meet, and having them come up with suggestions and ways and things that will help that particular community, because each community, of course, is different economically, and they have a different educational level, and they also have a different family structure. So some communities can fight one way, some communities can fight another way. We also need to hold our political structure a lot more accountable for our stability financially, that making sure that we have good jobs, that they're available in our community, that we don't have to travel far and spend our entire check to get to work only to not have anything when we come back from work. These political people are put in place to ensure that our rights and the things that we deserve are in place and that we aren't taken advantage of. When you look at the gentrification process in Philadelphia and you look at the political system in Philadelphia, our political politicians have allowed for this gentrification to go on for years, and they are not protecting us. They're not protecting our rights. They're not ensuring our home ownership, and they're not taking those of us that are renting and putting us in a better economic position to become homeowners. So the process will continue on and on until such time as it becomes in the radar of those people in politics that have the ability to slow the process and help ensure that we get to stay in our neighborhoods a lot longer. There are others involved for sure. The developers have a vested interest in allowing neighborhoods to go down longer, and they don't come in sooner to build up the neighborhoods while they're black neighborhoods. And also the developers are part of the process that takes the housing that is being built and overprice it so that those that are living there now can't afford to move up. So there are many levels of people who are benefiting from the gentrification process, and they're feeding their families with this process. We need to take a new process, a new look at the process, and we need to be more sensitive to each other. We want people to economically grow. We want businesses to grow. We want developers to be here, but we also want what is being built to be available to the community and the people that sacrifice to keep the community up, even at the low level that the people who are gentrifying believe that it is. We need to definitely, as a people, take more note of helping people in neighborhoods who are being gentrified. Some of us that live in neighborhoods that aren't being gentrified do not have a reason to take any involvement in the gentrification process or in the fighting of the gentrification process for those other people in other neighborhoods. but I think it's going to take an entire village in order to stop the gentrification process. I thank you for allowing me to come and speak at the Upgrade series, and I appreciate everything that you guys have listened to me about. Please continue to support Upgrade and continue to allow Upgrade to further the community and grow the community and advance the community. I thank you very much.